She still sets a place at the kitchen table for one that never came home. There is a jar on her mantel that holds a ticket she never used, and, on cold nights, she talks to it like a stubborn old friend. Tonight she will tell you the thing even the house has tried to forget. I was born when the town had one light at the corner, and the trains carried gossip through the night. We lived in a clapboard house whose paint peeled like old letters, and my mother kept the kettle on a slow, steady flame, as if heat might stitch the days together. I remember the sound of the porch swing catching its breath, and the way the wind from the cornfields would find the loose boards and make them sing. I was small then, long after the war, and the world felt roomy enough for all our mistakes to be mended. When David stepped off the bus that spring, he carried a smell of diesel and city rain, and a smile like he had been saving it for someone who deserved it. He worked 2 jobs, night shifts at the mill and mornings delivering papers, and he learned the edges of this town the way you learn the outline of a photograph, by tracing it until it looks like home. He loved my hands the way people love things they can count, practical and steady. We married under a sky that forgot to thunder. For the first few years there was bread and the small bright things people call happiness. There was also a silence that settled into the corners, not loud but patient, waiting its turn. Our son, Eli, came with a full head of dark hair, and a cry that sounded like the church bell. For a while, the world narrowed to his breath, and the way light pooled on the nursery rug. Then the seasons began to do their quiet work, jobs changed, prices climbed, and promises wore thin at the seams. David kept his hands in the mill until they ached, and sometimes he came home with the look of a man who'd slept in someone else's dreams. I told myself I would be enough, and for a while I was. I canned peaches and mended shirts and read the same story at night until Eli fell asleep with his thumb in his mouth. I set a place at the table and called the town by name in the mornings. I can say, plainly, that regret does not arrive as one big thing. It leaks. It is a draft in winter that you ignore until the frost wakes you. The first small crack came the day Eli fell through the ice on Miller's Pond. I remember the sound of the ice as if it was a voice, thin, surprised, then gone. The boys pulled him out with blue lips and splintered courage. We got him to the hospital and the doctors said he would be fine. He came home with a limp that had a new rhythm and an appetite for being held too long. After that, nights felt sharper. David started drinking heavier, a slow tally of evenings that made mornings brittle. Work became his only safe place. There was a summer when David left a note on the kitchen table, and the house kept reading it over my shoulder for days. He wrote that he could not bear the shadow that had settled between us, that he needed air that didn't smell of old regrets. He left with his jacket, with the bag he'd used for years, and the bus rolled him away like a photograph flipping off a page. I told Eli that his daddy would return, that men sometimes went away to find their way back. I stacked my days like kindling and waited for a spark I never saw. The secret I carried is not the kind people tell at church picnics. It is smaller and more ordinary, and because of that, it grew teeth. The night before David left, I found an envelope tucked behind the loose floorboard under my bed. It had his handwriting on it, and the name of a woman from a town 3 counties over. There were train schedules folded within, and a promise he had written in a hurried hand to leave at dawn. I sat on the floor and felt the house shrink. For a long time I thought I would read the letter again and again until the words softened, but they never did. What I did was worse than ripping it up. I slid the envelope back and pressed the board until it snapped into place, and then went to sleep with a face made of careful calm. That choice, small, private, cowardly, rearranged everything. If I had shown him the letter, maybe he would have laughed and tossed it, or maybe it would have been the last thing between us. Instead, I tucked the truth into the wall like a bone, and the house learned to hold that secret with me. Time is generous with excuses. It taught me how to turn the ordinary into habit. I became the woman who waited. I learned to keep my hands busy so my thoughts would not find the path under the boards. Eli grew into a man who made his own trains of thought and left with a backpack and a quick apology that felt like a closed door. He called sometimes. His voice sounded like a town I had not visited in years. Once he came back for a weekend, sat on the porch with a beer, and asked me if I had ever left. I wanted to tell him that I had left 1,000 times, inside my head, through the letter. Through the night I kept myself awake with the weight of what I had not said, but my mouth shaped only the weather and the way the garden was coming along. I learned to make small silences into armor. Years collected on the mantel as family photos with missing people. The jar with the unused ticket became my talisman. I would polish it and set it back like a promise to an absent God. I would speak to it sometimes, clumsy, half-formed conversations about what might have been. Neighbors would ask about my days, and I'd hand them a piece of cake and a smile. The town continued its slow rotation. Children grew, businesses closed, new ones opened. The train tracks still hummed, a constant line through my life. One winter, Eli sent a letter that was different, not the tidy notes of progress, but a folded page with news that scraped and bled. He wrote of a man he'd known on the road, a man who spoke like my husband once did, who had taught him the way to sharpen a blade, how to fix a carburetor, how to make coffee strong enough to stand a spoon up in. Eli wrote that he had found warmth in certain hands and a place that felt like belonging. He wrote that he forgave, though he did not name what he forgave. I held that page until the lines blurred, and then I burned it in the sink, watching the smoke curl like an answer I did not dare ask for. When the last winter came, I walked the house and listened. The floorboards remembered every footstep. The kettle remembered every argument. I took the envelope from beneath the board and unfolded it with fingers that trembled like the first frost. The handwriting was not neat. It was the handwriting of a man who had decided to be brave enough to leave. His words were not cruel. They were merely human, a confession, a fear, a wish to be honest. In the end, what I had feared most, the truth, was smaller than I had made it. The enormity of my shame had been manufactured by my own silence. I buried the letter in a tin box with the ticket and a handful of peach pits, walked to the pond, and tossed the box into the water where the ice had once threatened us. The jar on the mantel still sits, empty of answers. The house keeps the quiet like a patient friend. I keep my chair by the window and watch the trains go by, and when the night is thin I hear the echo of a life that had choices I did not take. If I could gather the years like a quilt and stitch them with a better hand, I would have left the letter on the table and asked for whatever came after. I cannot take back that night. I can only tell it now, because the telling is the only time the house and I are in agreement. We learn too late that honesty is its own kind of mercy.